Happy Kwanzaa, everyone. Today is Imani, and your trivia question for today is
Word Kwanzaa means
A. History. B.
heritage.
Heritage. And C. Togetherness. And D. Fruit. First fruit.
tell us your answers in the comments below.
Hello, everyone. My name is Dior Lindsay. I'm a licensed Master of Social Work, and I'm the Vice President of the Buffalo Association of Black Social Workers. And today I have with me one of my favorite people, one of my colleagues, and also favorite friends, and Rashawn Smalls. So I'll let him talk a little bit about himself.
Hello, everyone. My name is Rashawn Smalls. Let me take this off. My name is Rashawn Smalls, and I am a board member for the Erie County Restorative Justice Coalition. In my current employment, I work in human services, specifically as a program manager for advancing tobacco-free communities. So my focus is to work to address some of the health disparities that inner city communities experience, and just encourage a healthier environment.
So we wanted to talk a little bit today about 2020, right? It's been a very difficult and unpredictable year. Among the COVID-19 pandemic, we've had the most hurricanes we've ever experienced on record. We've experienced significant loss of very important black figures like Chadwick Boseman. We lost Kobe Bryant, right? Very important sports icon. We lost Little Richard. We lost Rep. John Lewis, who was a very, very important figure when it comes to the civil rights movement. We've had recession. The economy has just been significantly impacted, and I'm sure that the list could be even longer.
We've had a divisive election, national election, also on top of all of those things that you said you mentioned.
Absolutely. So, just as a social worker, it's important to be able to have a conversation about how we're coping and what we're doing, and to consider our mental health during all of this. And one question that I wanted to ask everyone is, during the difficult times, what have you done to overcome the challenges of 2020, right? So I think it's a good way to be able to have a conversation about coping skills. It's a conversation about thinking about what have you done to get as far as you've made it so far, but also what are some things that you might want to change or think about trying that can make you feel a little bit better. So for me, I know that some of my coping skills are prayer. I find that one to be very important to me, but also listening to music. And one of my absolute favorites is taking a nap. That is just one of my absolute favorites. There's actually on social media, there's a site called the Nap Ministry, and it talks about black resistance through rest and repair.
Absolutely essential. We cannot survive or live, exist without sleep. So.
Absolutely. So just thinking about our coping skills and what we can do, I wanted to just list a couple and have you think about what you've already been doing, or what are some things that you might want to change. And one of the things that comes to my mind first is when you have these thoughts or emotions and feelings, to label them, right? So you got to name it to tame it, I've heard once. And whether or not that's through the process of writing it down and practicing self-reflection, or that could be the process of talking to somebody that you trust, a loved one, or talking with a social worker or a therapist. Just being able to recognize those thoughts sometimes helps us better to be able to push through them. Another good coping skill is meditation, right? Just taking some time to be able to think about you know, what we are currently experiencing and being in the present moment and taking time to just recognize what's going on in your body, what's going on in your mind. And there are wonderful resources out there for practicing meditation and mindfulness. One personally that I use myself is called Insight Timer. I use it every day. It's very effective, it's very useful, and I find that it's very effective for me to be able to, you know, practice that mindfulness and be in a more meditative state. But before I continue with my list, Rashawn, you got any coping skills you like to do?
Well, one of the more important things that I use to cope is just a practice of, one of the more important things that I use to as a coping skill is it's more of a way of self-talking and encouraging myself. I think I try to be as intentional as I can when I think about what I'm grateful for. So it's sometimes it's a matter of just saying, hey, let's be silent, let's be still, and let's focus on some of the things that you are grateful for. You know, so just the thought or the attitude of gratitude, if you will, is one of the more important things that I do to engage in a way of, you know, coping and also nurturing, right? You know, and so you know, we talk about coping. It seems technical, but that is a way that I tend to nurture my spirit.
Mm-hmm. I'm so glad that you mentioned gratefulness. That's another really, really good exercise that we can do to, you know, ground ourselves and to be able to cope with everything that's going on, right? Maybe just try listing one or two things that you're grateful for every single day.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe once after that, you know, you're getting into, you know, a groove of things. Challenge yourself to name 3. Challenge yourself to name 4, you know, and think about how far that you can get with naming the things that you're grateful for, because when you appreciate what you have appreciates in value.
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes we don't recognize, you know, the things that are around us, and sometimes we don't recognize them until they're gone. And I think that is one of the hardest pieces of this year, right? We've also experienced a lot of loss during this time, during the COVID-19 pandemic. And another coping skill that I think is super important is not only being aware of what you can control and what you can't control. There are multiple exercises that you can practice, but the most simple one is writing out a list, right?
Mm-hmm.
Thinking about those things that are within inside your control and thinking of the things that aren't inside your control. And recognizing that one of the things that we can do is to take out time to grieve. Mm-hmm. And making sure that we have time and respect and peace for whatever we're grieving or whoever we're separated from during this difficult time. You know, taking time out to do that is in itself an important piece of self-care that we can do for ourselves during this time.
It's a way of honoring yourself. It's a way of honoring your experiences.
Mm-hmm.
It's a way of honoring yourself. It's a way of honoring your experiences, which is extremely important. Right? We tend to honor other things, objects, but when it comes to our own experiences, like we lack in that practice right there. So that's extremely important. Right there.
Yeah. Well, a couple of other things that I think I would like for you all to take from this video is that taking a walk is a really, really good thing too. You know, just getting out, of course, you know, a safe and socially distanced way, but being able to get some fresh air and get those endorphins going, you know, endorphins, it's a feel-good, happy, you know, experience for us. It releases those chemicals in the brain, and getting out and moving at a time where we've been forced to be indoors for so long is a really good way to effectively cope, not only for the body, but also for the mind. Sometimes just taking a clear walk, which I know you love taking walks.
I love walking. I'm an avid, I'm really, really impassioned. And just to highlight the point, I think the reverse is true, right? We talk about walking, right? For me, I spend a lot of time in my head, like thinking. And so for me, walking is a way for me to get out of my head and into my body, a way for me to move. And, and it sort of kind of levels or helps me find a sense of balance, because, obviously with the isolation, dealing with COVID, and, we tend to spend time isolated, and we tend to think and constantly think, and, it can become sort of harmful to spend as much time thinking and worrying about the unknown, right? Because this is an extreme time of unknown. And so walking for me is a way for me to get out of my head and into my body and find a sense of balance.
So one last thing that I want you all to take in terms of, thinking about coping skills and practicing coping skills. I actually did a training earlier this week. There was two black male social workers, and one of them, he said, drowning in the middle of the ocean is the worst time to learn how to swim. So when we think about the practice of coping skills, one thing that I hope all of you take into consideration is that it's a practice. It's not something that happens overnight. The more you do it, the better it gets. But the last time that you would want to practice it is metaphorically.
Absolutely needed.
When you're drowning in the middle of the ocean.
No question. It's extremely important to just take the first step, right? That can be the hardest step, right? To take the first step. And, one of the things that I tend to think about, you talk about, some of the stresses, the mental health challenges we experiences, the pandemic, and what that has brought to us. And I look at where we're at now, right? Literally, we have Christmas coming. We're in Hanukkah, right? We also have Kwanzaa coming, right? These beautiful traditions that we have. As an African American person, as a black man, as a black person, part of this black, community, diaspora, I think about Kwanzaa. I think about the first fruits. I think about the number of principles. I think about specifically Imani, right? And faith. And we talked about honoring, traditions, our culture. We talk about honoring ourselves. That's extremely important now as we think about and reflect on these principles, because, when it comes to, us as people, we tend to be extremely critical of each other as individuals. And, we lack severely in honoring, ourselves. And it's so important in terms of self-care to say, hey, let me pause and honor the best of who I am, right? And that's what, we approach Kwanzaa. This is what we want to think about. How can we honor the best of who we are as individuals and what we bring? And some of us may think, hey, well, I have no best, right? And, well, I would encourage you to think, to live in this imaginative piece, like what would the best self be? And how would you honor that best self? Because it's extremely important now more than ever that we find a way to be kind and nurturing to ourselves, because we're facing, police brutality, and there's a number of different challenges that we're experiencing. And so it's important that when we reflect on these principles, specifically Imani and faith, that we understand that this is as much about us as individuals as it is about us collectively. Absolutely. And we have to honor ourselves. Otherwise we will continue to find ourselves, facing with, these mental stresses that we don't have the coping skills to deal with. And so, that's something I would want to share as well. And I would say lastly, when it comes to Kwanzaa, right, and our tradition and culture, it reminds me of a quote that Dr. Carter G. Woodson, who's the founder of I want to say Black History Month, but it's not Black History Month, it's Negro History Week, right, which ultimately became, Black History Month. So, he once said that if a race has no history, if it has no worthwhile tradition, it becomes a negligible factor in the thought of the world and stands in danger of being exterminated. And so for me, he drove home the point of the importance of history, of tradition, of culture. And we have to embrace that and hold on to that with everything.